Welcome back to online English class. This is level 2, lesson 18, which starts on June 3rd. And this is part 3. This is the last video. In this video, we're working on Unit 10, Lesson C. You are probably watching this video between June 1st and June 14th. This video was filmed on May 31st, 2020. So we're on Lesson C, Unit 10, which is on page 126. Page 126. So in this lesson, we're going to learn about direct and indirect objects. Again, I don't really know why you need to know this, but okay, we'll go with it. So, let's start here. We have nouns. So let's use the sentence. She baked a cake for mom. She baked a cake for mom. So first, let's find the verbs. The verb is baked. Okay? So the verb is in pink. Now I want to find all the nouns. The nouns are going to be in green. So the nouns are she. She is a person, so she's a noun. Cake is a thing. And mom is a person. So in this sentence, the verb is baked. The nouns are she, cake, and mom. So in this sentence, we have one verb and 3 nouns. Okay? So, let's look through the nouns. There are 2 types of nouns. First, we have the subject. The subject is the thing or person doing the action, or the verb. And what's the verb? Baked. So who baked? Who baked? She. She baked. So the subject is she. The subject of this sentence is she. And now all of the other nouns in the sentence are objects. So, she is a subject. We have cake. Cake is an object. Mom is now an object. So, this is our sentence. The subject is she, the verb is baked, and then the objects are cake and mom. And we have 2 types of objects. The first object is the direct object. The direct object answers the question, what? So we can ask, what did she bake? The question, what? What did she bake? She baked a cake. So, the cake is the direct object. It answers the what question. So, the cake is the direct object. Now let's look at the who question. Let's look at the indirect object. The indirect object answers the who question. So now we know that she baked a cake. She baked a cake, but for who? So, who did she bake a cake for? Who did she bake a cake for? For mom. So mom answers the who question. So if mom answers the who question, then mom is the indirect object. So we have the sentence, she baked a cake for mom. The verb is baked, and then we have three nouns, she, cake, and mom. So which noun here is doing the action? Which noun is doing the verb, baked? She. She baked. So she is the subject. All the other nouns, cake and mom, become the objects. The direct object answers the what question, and the indirect object answers the who question. All right, so let's look more in the book. So we have a practice here. This is Joe's to-do list. What did he do yesterday? Okay, so we already know the subject. The subject is the thing that does the actions, which is Joe, he. So Joe is the subject. Joe is the person who is doing all of the verbs, all of the activities, the actions. So what did he do yesterday? Okay, so let's see. He bought flowers for Sylvia. Buy flowers for Sylvia, but we write buy in past tense because we're talking about yesterday. Joe bought flowers for Sylvia. Okay, so Joe bought flowers for Sylvia. Joe bought flowers for Sylvia. The verb. What is the verb in this sentence? The verb is bought. What is the noun? What are the nouns in the sentence? The nouns are Joe, flowers, and Sylvia. Remember, a verb is an action, a noun is a person, a place, or a thing. Joe is a person, flowers are a thing, Sylvia is a person. So these are our nouns. Okay, so we have, let me color them. So the verb is bought. The nouns are Joe, flowers, and Sylvia. So let's look at the nouns. There are two types of nouns. Let's look at the subject. The subject is the person doing the action, the verb. So who bought? Who bought? Joe bought. So Joe is the subject. Joe is the subject. Joe is the person who bought. Okay? So, the subject. We finished the subject. Let's go back to nouns. We have object. The object is all of the other nouns in the sentence. So, we already did Joe. So we have flowers and Sylvia left. So that means flowers becomes the object and Sylvia becomes the object. So we have two objects, flowers and Sylvia. Well, we also have two different types of objects. We have direct objects and indirect objects. Direct objects answer the what question. So the what question is, what did Joe buy? What did Joe buy? He bought flowers. He bought flowers. So because flowers answers the what question, flowers is the direct object. Okay, so we have one more object here. So let's look at the indirect object. The indirect object answers who. Who did Joe buy flowers for? Who did Joe buy flowers for? For Sylvia. So, Sylvia answers the who question. Because Sylvia answers the who question, Sylvia is the indirect object. Okay, so we have the sentence, Joe bought flowers for Sylvia. Joe is the subject. Bought is the verb. Flowers is the direct object. And Sylvia is the indirect object. What's next on Joe's to-do list? So buy flowers for Sylvia, check. Buy a card for Nick. So we need to write this task in the past tense. Buy a card for Nick. So we can start off with Joe, or we can say he for Joe, okay? Now we have to write buy a card for Nick in the past tense. What do we change the verb buy to in past tense? We change buy to bought because buy is an irregular verb. So we say he bought a card for Nick. He bought a card for Nick. So in this sentence, we know the verb is bought, and we have the nouns are he, card, and Nick. With he, card, and Nick, which noun it goes with bought? Who's doing the action here? Who bought? He bought. So he is the subject, which means card and Nick are the objects. Okay, so he bought. What did he buy? He bought a card. So card answers the what question, and the word that answers the what question is the direct object. So the card is the direct object. Who did he buy a card for? He bought a card for Nick. So Nick answers the who question, and the object that answers the who question is the indirect object. So Nick is the indirect object. Okay, so I want you to finish all of the questions here, and I want you to identify the verb. I lost my paper. I want you to identify the verb, all of the nouns, and then identify the subject, the direct object, and the indirect object for number 2 to number 8. Okay, so now at the bottom we have complete the conversations. Use a pronoun for the indirect object. So we need to change the indirect object to a pronoun. What's a pronoun? The pronouns are I, you, we, they, he, she, it. These are pronouns. I, you, we, they, he, she, it. But the pronouns for indirect objects are me, you, us, them, him, her, it. These are the pronouns for indirect objects. I becomes me, you becomes you, we becomes us, they becomes them, he becomes him, she becomes her, and it is the same, it and it. So these are the pronouns for indirect objects. We can see it here at the top, where we have Tim gave Mary a present, or we can say Tim bought her a present. Mary is she, but because it's an indirect object, we change she to her. So for indirect objects, we use me, you, us, them, him, her, it. So what did Joe buy Sylvia? Joe bought her flowers. 2. What did Joe buy Nick? Well, let's see. Joe bought a card for Nick. So we can say Joe bought a card for him. Joe bought a card for him. Number 3. What did Jim write Pam? Okay, it says write Pam a letter. And Pam is a she. So we can say Joe wrote a letter to Pam. Pam is she, but because Pam is the indirect object, we change she to her. Joe wrote a letter to her. 4. What did Joe buy Mary and Judy? What did Joe buy Mary and Judy? It says Joe buy a cake for Mary and Judy. Okay, so I'm going to say he bought a cake for Mary and Judy. So this is 2 people, so we use them. But because Mary and Judy are the indirect objects, we need to use the pronouns for indirect objects. We change they to them. So he bought a cake for them. 5. What did Joe give Ava? Give roses to Ava. Wow, he has so many presents. What did Joe give Ava? Maybe a headache? A bill? Okay, so Joe gave roses to Ava is she. We change she to them. We change she to her. So we say Joe gave roses to her. 6. What did Joe send Paul? Send an invitation to Paul. So Joe sent an invitation to Paul. Paul is a he. Because it's an indirect object, we change he to him. 7. What did Joe send David? Send some money to David. Joe sent money to David is a man, he. So for pronouns for indirect objects, we use him. Joe sent money to him. 8. What did Joe give Sue? Give a ride to Sue. When you give a ride, it means you tell them, hey, get in my car. I will take you to where you need to go. So Joe gave a ride to Sue. Sue is a she, so we say her. Joe gave a ride to her. Okay, we're going to do one more thing on Joe's to-do list. I'm going to write one more thing here. I'm going to say, give Tan a headache. Give Tan a headache. So the question is, what did Joe give you? What did Joe give you? Let's see, give Tan a headache. So I'm going to say, he gave, because this is yesterday, past tense, he gave me a headache. So we change Tan, which is me, we change I to me. So what did Joe give you? He gave me a headache. Problem solved. That is the end of lesson 18. Okay. Thanks for watching. Bye.